Welcome, travelers, champions, heroes, and villains, to the adventure. When last we left off, Jahlad had another choice to make in his first quest, to abandon or release the red Dragonborn, Gashur, who, from the looks of the brand seared into his arm, appears to be a worshipper, or at the very least involved in some way, with the evil goddess Tiamat. If Jahlad lets him out of the cage, there's a chance Gashur may help him in fighting off the kobolds. There is, however, an equal chance in Gashur betraying Jahlad and stabbing him in the back at the most awful of times. Let me out of here. I can help you. Jahlad searched the bodies of the dead kobolds in the jail, eventually finding a key. As he walked over to the cell of Gashur, the choice became clear. The cell door swung open with an echoing sound of metal grinding against itself. Thank you. This will be easier to do together. This cavern cannot be much longer. Jahlad gave Gashur a nod. I am trusting you for now. Do not make me regret it. Gashur went over to where the kobolds had stashed the remnants of his equipment in the room, pulling a mace from the discarded boxes. Jahlad, in the meantime, opened up the remaining cages. The bodies were in fact quite dead in the center cage. The goats in the far cage were quite more lively, bouncing their heads off the cage door as Jahlad approached. Doing his best to stay out of the line of fire, Jahlad plunged the key into the lock and opened the cage door. The goats immediately trampled out of their prison, letting out bleats of frustration and relief. One goat remained behind the bars. Its leg appeared to be broken, and it was limping towards the edge of the cell door. Gashur walked over towards the situation. What are you going to do about that? What do you mean? Gashur points to the injury of the goat. It won't be able to live in the wild like that. Most likely, it will suffer and die, or be picked off by a predator. Jahlad reached into his pack, producing a healing potion. As he reached out to feed the concoction to the wounded animal, Gashur sighed. Are you going to waste a potion on that goat? Jahlad, in a moment of hesitation for both the character and the player. Keep in mind, this was our very first game we were playing, so Jahlad's player hadn't gotten out of her head of game logic, and in the almost absolute freedom that tabletop RPGs afford you. I think the aftermath of this helped open that freedom up a bit. Jahlad let out a sigh. What do you suggest? I can make it quick for the creature. Jahlad looked at the wounded creature and the small trail of blood that accompanied it, and he gave a silent nod to Gashur. Jahlad turned his back, not wanting to witness the death of this goat. The sickening squelch noise occurred only a moment later, and the goat was mercifully put out of his misery. Jahlad and Gashur left the carnage behind and began to venture into the cavern further. Jahlad to stop the attacks on the caravans, Gashur to find his brother. As the partners of convenience walked out of the jail area, they were alerted to the sounds of angry goats and kobolds trying to wrangle the freshly escaped goats, which just so happened to create a bunch of very easy targets. Jahlad went in for the attack, and Gashur backed him up by calling out to Tiamat with sacred flames, scorching a kobold, while a few well-placed arrows took out the remainder. The goats let out some bleats of approval, stamping the dead kobolds before running towards the entrance of the cave. It seems at least the choice of allowing the goats to run free had paid off for the ranger. In front of the duo, oddly out of place, there was a large curtain strung up over a large opening leading further into the cavern, clearly indicating something important. However, off to the side was another offshoot of the cave, leading away from the curtain. Gashur questioned Jahlad which direction the pair should go. Jahlad, not wanting a surprise attack coming from behind them, decided to take the branching path first. Unsure of what to expect in the room, Jahlad was shocked to find only a single kobold. It seemed odd after so much of the cave had several kobolds defending or milling about that this room only had a single kobold. However, what it lacked in defenders, it more than made up for in an overpowering stench. The kobold was quickly put down before it could call for any additional help, Jahlad's accuracy with arrows coming in very advantageous for the pair of Dragonborn. Exploring the room, it didn't take long to discern where the smell was coming from. In the corner of the room were several bodies of kobolds in various states of decay. There was something wrong with them. Some of them had more than a single head. Some of their bones were twisted into unnatural shapes. Some of them were... Why is the floor slimy? Jahlad looked at the ground and saw that it looked very slick and wet. Jahlad knelt down, investigating. The putrid grew further. As he got closer to the slime, his mind flashed back to the time in the forest when the ooze monster had slit its way through the forest. How it had taken his friends and warped them into something else. Jahlad took a sample of the goop in one of his vials, stood up and looked at Kishore. Something bad is going on in here. We must stop it. I will help you, since you are helping me. Jahlad nodded to his companion as they made their way back to the curtained-off section of the cave. Reaching his hand out to the curtain, Jahlad tried to push the anger away, knowing that stealth was the better option in the moment. Jahlad looked to Kishore as the final battle loomed. Whatever we find in there, stick together. Take them on, one by one. I can do that, Kishore added. Jahlad lifted the very edge of the curtain, sneaking in to see what was waiting for them on the other side. It was set up for a ceremony of sorts. There were small bench seats scattered about for kobolds, and a small altar at the end of the room, upon which sat some sort of eggs. There were 5 of them that sat about in a circle. Nearby, chained to one of 4 pillars set in a square about the room, was another Dragonborn. That is my brother, Malathor, came a whisper from behind Jahlad's ear. I must save him. Jahlad lined up his shot at one of the 8 kobolds in the room, taking a deep breath in. These creatures were playing with something awful, something that tugged at Jahlad's past. Releasing the arrow along with his breath, Jahlad surprised the kobolds, felling one with a quick hit to the back of the head. Kishore ran up and cracked another on the back of the head with his mace, knocking it to the ground. Malathor, the captive Dragonborn, wrestled against his bond. You follow the false gods, Malathor's voice rang out. I am coming for you, brother. Jahlad took another shot, felling another kobold. As Kishore rolled up his tattered rags, the brand on his arm began to glow in a myriad of colors. Red, green, blue, white, and then black. He released a sphere from his hands that changed colors as it traveled through the air before coming into contact with a kobold erupting into fire damage. Tiamat is displeased with you. Kishore voiced his anger at the kobolds. The remaining kobolds made a break for the altar. However, only 2 made it. The other 2 weren't so lucky, as spells and arrows ended their lives. However, once on the altar, the kobolds grabbed the eggs and began smashing them and coating themselves in the viscous ooze. I don't like this at all, Jahlad said. There was a sickening noise as the kobolds' bodies began to swell. Bones could be heard cracking, splintering apart, and then reforming. The kobolds began to merge into one hideous monstrosity. What is this? Kishore ran up to intervene, knowing his brother wouldn't be able to defend himself in the current restrained state he was in. Jahlad backed up his new allies with arrows that didn't seem to provide the same level of destruction against this creature as they did against the kobolds when they were more koboldy. Kishore summoned the strength he possessed when face to face with this monster, and with a mighty swing of his mace, he turned around, smashing open the manacles that had Malathor chained to the pillar. Are you okay, brother? Kishore questioned. Malathor didn't respond with a word, but instead by punching Kishore in the face. Kishore spat out blood and a tooth. Jahlad stared at the situation, wondering what this was all about, but there was a time for answers later. There was an abomination before them that needed to be dealt with, and deal with it Jahlad did. With a mighty draw, he unleashed a final arrow into the creature, felling it to the ground. The abomination was finally silent. Jahlad made his way up to the altar where the brothers were standing at a tense standstill. What's going on? Jahlad questioned. You should never have come here, Kishore. I will never leave you behind, brother. Malathor pulled his fist up again, but before he could connect, the kobold body began to seize and convulse. All eyes turned to the monster. An unusual sound like that of an egg cracking echoed into the shrine. Both of the heads of the conjoined creature splintered open, and brains rolled out of their skulls and onto the floor. What? All of the Dragonborns questioned. The brains rolled over on their own, legs pressing out of the folds of the gray matter. There was more to this cave and these kobolds than it appeared. This was no simple group of merchant robbers, after all. Something else was going on in here, But to find out what it was, you will have to stay tuned for the next adventure.